The pain is finally over for Louisville basketball, but what on earth should we expect from year one of the Pat Kelsey era?
You are Locked On College Basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey there, what's up? Welcome into the Locked On College Basketball Podcast, the only daily national college hoop show out there. I'm your host, Isaac Schade, and you're joining me at the place to get your college basketball content every single day as part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making us your first listen or watch. And I want to remind you that you can catch every episode ad-free on Amazon Music. Special shout out to all the everydayers joining us. And of course, all the great Locked On College Basketball Discord members as well. So glad you're all here. Let's get into it. This episode's brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets. Guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Okay, we've got another team preview as we are now less than 2 weeks away from the tip-off of the college basketball season. Today, we're getting into some Louisville Cardinals action, and so to help me do that is our good buddy, Dalton Pence. And man, Dalton, I know we're both excited to move on to Louisville basketball being relevant again. And folks, that's where we're going today. We'll get into these big storylines, Louisville's completely overhauled roster. What should we expect this year? Things like that. Dalton and I will eventually get into making predictions for starters in segment 2. We will make predictions for the season in terms of record, finish, NCAA tournament. Could it be in year one? We'll get to all of that coming up on the show. Very quickly, let me remind you all, unfortunately, of what happened last season. Louisville doubled their win total. Eight wins last season.
You really have to go there. We can just turn the page.
We're going there, DP, so that we can be excited about what's ahead. 8-24 overall, 3-17 in ACC play, 15th in the ACC when there were not 18 teams as there are now. Yeah, lost to NC State in the first round of the ACC tournament and finished the season on an 8-game losing streak. And DP, I think that's where we got to start, because college basketball is better when Louisville is good. The Kenny Payne era is mercifully over. In totality, in the 2 years, 12-52 overall record, 5-35 in ACC play. Prior to that, I looked it up. The last time Louisville had back-to-back seasons with single-digit win totals was 1941-42. The last time Louisville won an NCAA tournament game as we sit here now is 2017, and 21 former Cardinals are now on other college basketball rosters this season. That is done and gone and behind us. What is so thankful in your mind, Dalton, about turning the page?
It's just that. It's turning the page. And what's crazy is that you mentioned how bad Louisville was in those 2 years, and there were still some fans that were arguing that he should have got a third year.
What?
And
no.
Yeah, don't even get me started on that. We could talk the entirety of this podcast about that. But regardless, I think, it's just turning the page. Since I started hosting Locked On Louisville in 2021, August of that year, Louisville basketball has missed the tournament each and every season. It's been a tough go with talking about basketball because, it wasn't whether we were going to win or lose the game. It was how many points. Were they going to cover the spread? They're only a 20-point underdog. Are they going to cover? That isn't Louisville basketball, and I'm glad that you said it. So many people are living in recency bias and not really acknowledging that Louisville is not like some run-of-the-mill program. It is a very good historic program that I believe that college basketball, especially the ACC, is better when Louisville is good. So just turning over a new leaf, bringing in some juice to this program. Pat Kelsey is, as lively as they come, and he's been so energetic, and that jolt into the program has just been what fans need. And obviously, you have to win games, but, he's won the offseason, so to speak. I'm trying to, mirror my bunny ear quotations, but the camera is a little tricky. But you understand what I'm saying. It's just having some new hope in this program.
I'm right with you. That's a great segue because I have loved Pat Kelsey, head basketball coach in his Charleston era. I wasn't really dialed in too much in his Winthrop years, but 9 years at Winthrop, 3 at Charleston, took 4 different teams in that span to the NCAA tournament, and just brings this great energy. Yes, we have not seen what's going to actually translate this season yet. We can't yet because it hasn't started. We got a couple weeks, but I think you're spot on, Dalton. He's done everything you need to do to bring energy and liveliness and resurgence to this program that needs to get back to the level that it has been. Let's remember that Louisville is just 5 seasons removed from finishing 9th at KenPom in the 2019-20 season. We didn't get to see what happened that postseason, unfortunately. Thanks a lot, COVID. But it's not so far out of memory that it's like, what is Louisville basketball when they're good? Because we know it and we've seen it. I love the move of bringing in like a Peyton Siva to say this is a national champion. Yes, that championship counts. Don't you dare say otherwise, folks.
I think the only people that don't say it now are either Kentucky fans or they're direct rival fans like Virginia, Duke, Carolina, or they're just trolls. I mean, at this point, it's old. And it's tired.
That's right. It's tired. So speaking of tired is probably Pat Kelsey because of all the energy he's had to exert to get to this point. Literally a completely new roster, one holdover, a walk-on, but literally everyone else is new. Just what has excited you about what you've seen from him this offseason?
I mean, I think it's just going out and replacing a whole roster in a way that you can make a justifiable case that this is going to be a good team. Usually when a coach comes in April and there's not much high school recruiting left, the portal's already taken off and you have to basically hit the ground running right away. There's some concern as to whether or not you're going to be able to put together a formidable roster in year 1. And he's done that and more. And I think it speaks volumes to, his grasp on the NIL situation in Louisville, which is fairly good. And you have to credit that as well because it's a new game in today's era of college sports. So I just think, number one, the energy's been great. Number two, he's gone out and gotten some dudes, man. Like, he's got a really good squad that people won't talk about enough because they aren't as recognizable names as some others, but he's gotten players that fit what he's trying to do. And I'm bullish on this roster, and I know that we'll talk about that coming up here shortly.
Yeah, it's so well said, Dalton. And I think it's especially highlighted coming off of a weekend where Tony Bennett retired from Virginia because he was not, by his own admission, cut out to do it this way. It seems that Pat Kelsey is not only okay with it, he's embracing it. And to me, those are the coaches that are going to win in 2024 and beyond because they're in on it, because they're saying, all right, this is the deal. All right, what do we got to do to go out and get dudes? And as you said, he went out and got some dudes. And Dalton, for me, that's both the intriguing thing and the scary thing about this roster, because as you look at where teams, where people have Louisville projected preseason, we'll talk about it with our FanDuel read in a bit. They have Louisville with the 5th best odds to win the ACC regular season. You see the ACC preseason media poll where Louisville's 9th and all over. But I think that's both the fun and the scary thing is it's almost impossible to have any idea what to truly expect from the Cards. What do you expect from the Cards?
I think it's funny. It's like you have a hypothetical. It's like, okay, show me how much you know ball by telling me how many games Louisville's going to win, because it's all over the place. And I told you pre-recording that I truly understand those that think Louisville might be hovering around 500. And then there's some like Kevin Sweeney, who is a college basketball reporter. He has Louisville as high as 3rd in the preseason AP poll, or not preseason AP poll, preseason ACC poll, I should say. They're not in the AP polls, shocker. But it is what it is. I think it's just sort of all over the place, but like I said, I'm more bullish on this team than I think a good amount. I think that the pieces there are going to be able to cohesively mesh. It might take some time. Unfortunately, the schedule's a little brutal, which we'll touch on. But I do think that this is a team that's going to win over 20 games, maybe not much over 20, but I do think that they're going to win over 20 and get to the NCAA tournament.
Okay, that's interesting. One other kind of tangential Louisville question. Last weekend, we saw Rick Pitino return to Rep Arena. Now the St. John's coach. Your closed eyes immediately tell me your thoughts. But one of the things that Andy Patton and I were talking about here on Locked On College Basketball was like, what is the Louisville reaction to that? And so I just wanted to get your thoughts on that whole scene.
I mean, to summarize it without going too far in depth, I guarantee that he regrets ever leaving Kentucky for the pros. That's pretty much a given. And he was fantastic there, Hall of Famer based on his Kentucky resume alone. Like, I don't hate that he went back there because he ultimately was going to eventually. I do feel some sort of way. I know that he feels some sort of way about how he was let go at Louisville. But it's kind of a kick in the gut to the fans that still supported him. I know he's not a fan of how Louisville treated himself and Tom Jurich, the athletic director that got fired. But the more confusing thing to me was I don't know that I've ever seen a sitting head coach of a college basketball team, a major D1 college basketball team, do basically a press run all weekend wearing Kentucky blue. And I'm like, I'm not even thinking of this as a Louisville fan. I'm like, what is St. John's AD thinking? Like, okay, my Hall of Fame head coach is sitting here doing a press run like, oh, Kentucky blue. My man, you coach it. You have a season in 3 weeks. Get your butt back up to New York and let's get this thing rolling. But it is what it is. It feels like he was always going to go back to Kentucky. So truthfully, I don't really care. He's been invited back to Louisville many times. So eventually you just have to put this on him. Like, the ball's in his court. Whether he comes back or not at this point, man, I truly don't care.
Yeah, I would love to see Rick Pitino in Louisville make good at some point. I just figured, similar to what I figured about Kentucky, it would be when he ultimately retires, which probably isn't too far off from now. And so I get it, going back to support your player and Mark Pope, but maybe there's a different way to do that than what Coach Pitino did.
No kidding.
Now, going back to Louisville primary, not Louisville tangential, part of the fun of having all these new players is that predicting who's going to start for this team and what the rotation is going to look like is a wide open endeavor. So Dalton and I are going to try to figure out if we can make any sense of that coming up in just a second. Right after I tell you about Roy. Hey, Locked On College Basketball fans, it's time to recognize our Roy Player of the Week. So far this season, we've pooled over $10,000 to support players on Roy. Micro deposits lead to massive change. With the Roy app, you can direct your support to the athletes you love, ensuring that all the funds go specifically to them. Unlike collectives, you know exactly where your support's going, and you can even receive exclusive content like personal videos and updates after the season. Best part? Risk-free. If the athlete transfers or doesn't deliver the content, well, shoot, you get your money back at that point. So we're going on brand right now. This week, we're supporting Louisville quarterback Tyler Shuck, who's having a great season. We just pitched in $100, and we'd love for you to join us. Even $10 makes a difference. Let's show Tyler the love and keep him connected to Louisville. Remember, pay today, celebrate tomorrow. Your support sets up your team for success. Plus, don't miss out on Roy's new exciting giveaway. 2 tickets to a game in November. Just download Roy, create an account, and enter referral code Locked On, and you're entered. Already on Roy? Any contribution to an athlete's campaign also gets you automatically entered. No purchase necessary, void where prohibited. Download Roy now and join the NIL game with no subscriptions and no fees. And be sure to check us out on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Roy_return on you for more info. Roy, support the players, change the game. Okay, let's dive deeper into Louisville's roster ahead of this season, where Dalton, literally the only player name that is the same on this year's roster as last year is walk-on Aiden McCool, who played 12 games for a total of 16 minutes and scored 2 points last year. Outside of that, 12 portal additions and 1 freshman. As you mentioned, it's like you're behind the game. So thankfully, Kenai Ruth's decommitted from Michigan after Juwan Howard was fired and is now a Card. As you look at these 12 portal guys, and I know we've got both Kobe Rogers and Ali Khalifa from BYU redshirting, but outside of that, man, what do you make about this? You talked about them as dudes. What do you make of this haul, and who most excites you?
I mean, I think you have players that can really buy into what Pat Kelsey is, pitching here, a lot of people wonder, is his playing style conducive to winning at the high level? Well, it is. Look at Alabama. Nate Oates runs a very similar system, a lot of three-pointers, really quick offensive tempo. There's a focus on offensive rebounding and just making the most out of your shots. So it's very similar to Nate Oates' style. It obviously isn't as prolific, but it's like I don't want this to sound disrespectful, but it's like, give us Nate Oates. We got Nate Oates at home. It's kind of something like that. And that's sort of a compliment to Pat Kelsey, I would say. So you have a lot of guys that shoot the ball really well. They are versatile defensively. They move without the ball. They open up, space for others. They attack space, and they rebound really well. That's literally all the key ingredients of what Pat Kelsey wants to do. A lot of it is buying into that system. And if they do so, I think that you have the skill sets collectively to have a really good team. And then you have some really good individual talent. I think Kason Pryor had a huge year for South Florida last year. He's going to be a focal point in the ACC. Terrence Edwards Jr. was great against big-time competition, won Sun Belt Player of the Year. And Isaac, I think what gets overlooked is Louisville, the most important addition. They brought in a veteran, battle-tested point guard who has played 3 seasons in the Big Ten. He might not be a guy that's going to score 20 points a game, but bringing in a player with that pedigree, it's huge. So I think that these aren't like household names like your Omar Ballo or, John L. Davis or any of those players. But these are some really, really good players that if you needed some convincing, go look at who was trying to bring those guys in and who Louisville won some battles over. So
I think that's a great way to put it, is like ball knowers. The people that are paying attention know the deal and know who Louisville won these recruiting battles over. And that's such a great point to make. Dalton, another one I wanted to ask you about is Coach Kelsey brings with him 3 guys from Charleston, in Kobe Rogers, in James Scott, in Rain Smith. How important do you think that is to have that trio to help set culture? Because obviously you got to still be Louisville, but Coach Kelsey's going to bring in his system and his stuff to kind of marry that. How important do you think it is, especially in this transfer portal age, to have some guys that come along with him?
Well, they know their styles. I mean, with Kobe next year, that's going to help when you have to replace a lot of the roster. But with 13 new guys and a brutal non-conference schedule, you need players playing their role as soon as possible. And having 2 guys that know their role already with James Scott and Rain Smith, I mean, you can't really overstate how important that is. Now, I don't think one might start. It's really hard to tell because there's so many different roster and lineup combinations. But James Scott is, I think he has a ton of potential. He was voted as one of the top shot blockers in high school on the Adidas circuit, and a guy that NBA draft scouts has sort of like penned as, okay, let's watch this player. Rain Smith can shoot the ball. Look at Louisville the past 3 years. What have they not been able to do? Shoot the basketball.
Shoot the basketball. Yes.
Yeah. So it's, here you go. You didn't have to say it. I mean, you're not wrong, but you didn't have to go there. Shout out Stephen A. Smith. But yeah, I mean, long story short, I do think it's critical that you have 3 players that are able to, help the other guys out with terminology or understanding defensive rotation, things of that nature.
We talked about the Kentucky of it all a second ago. I'm also curious about this, maybe kind of a little bit of a win. How gratifying is it to you, Dalton, to know that Louisville landed 2 players from BYU who didn't go with Mark Pope to Kentucky, but instead went to Mark Pope's now rival coming to you at Louisville? And obviously we're referencing Noah Waterman, who comes over from BYU, a big, and then Ali Khalifa, who is redshirting this year.
Well, if you ask Kentucky fans, they'll tell you both those players suck and they wouldn't have been able to play for Mark Pope yet. Mark Pope recruiting those players, trying to get them to Kentucky. But it's all in good fun. It's fun. I mean, I like Ali Khalifa as a situational center for next season. I think Noah Waterman's really going to help this team for what Pat Kelsey wants to do. Optically, I mean, it looks good that you did win 2 BYU recruitments over Kentucky. But at the end of the day, man, I'm one of those people that I just want players that fit this system. I don't really care where they come from. And it just is what it is. I think it matters more to Kentucky fans than Louisville fans at this point.
I think so too. And that's when you're in their heads a little bit. So Dalton, let's make some predictions then on starting lineup for this crew. As we said, it seems like it's pretty wide open, but there are certainly some guys that stand out above the rest. And also, let's also recognize it's less about who actually starts and who gets starters minutes, who finishes, but it's what we all want to talk about, and it's so fun. So who's your starting five as right now?
Especially with Louisville, it doesn't really mean as much because Kelsey subs so much, and you're going to have a rotation of about 9 guys probably that are going to play a good amount. It's really the matter of who's going to be the 5 on the court at the end of the game. I think that's probably a better question, but I think that there's 3 players for certain that are going to start. Case and Pryor, obviously Chucky Hepburn and Terrence Edwards Jr., the 3 penciled in starters, if you will. And then the debate on who the other 2 guys are, well, that's been sort of the talk of the town since Kelsey got hired and since the roster was finalized. For me, I think Koren Johnson from Washington starts. I think his ability to score the basketball in a microwave setting is really going to help this team. I think fantastic year at Washington last season. I think he's going to start alongside Hepburn. Then you could go a couple different ways. Do you go to James Scott to give you that traditional center? Is he ready to start in the ACC? For me, I think it's down between 3 guys: Waterman, Javon Hadley, and Abubakar Traore. I think right now it might go to the latter. I think Traore has looked really good in practice. His effort and his energy is very Dwayne Sutton-esque, if you remember that name, Isaac. I'm gonna say Traore gets the start. If not him, I'll probably say Hadley, but you can go in a couple different ways, which is kind of the beauty of it all.
Exactly, the mix and match, because ultimately on a college basketball roster, the number I always go to is you need 8 guys. You need 8 guys who you can trust, 5 starters, 3-man bench. Obviously, you're going to play more than that at times, but when push comes to shove, if you can have that. Before I give my starters, let me just follow up on your point, Dalton, about how much Pat Kelsey uses his bench. Last year at Charleston, the Cougars were 24th in the nation in bench usage. 2 seasons ago, 22nd in the nation, and back in 22, his first year at Charleston, 37th. So they've been top 40 in the nation in bench usage each of the past 3 seasons under Pat Kelsey. So to Dalton's great point, man, if you can contribute to this team, and if Pat Kelsey trusts you, you're going to see the court. And so just be on the lookout for that. I think that's such a great point. I'm right with you on Hepburn, Edwards, Pryor. I think those are penciled in as well. Give me Koren Johnson. I'm with you on that, Dalton. And the question is also, as you said, basically, is Pryor like kind of your stretch 4 playing as a 5, or do you start a true 5 alongside him, or do you start another wing? For me, I'm going to go with Hadley, Javon Hadley getting the start as the other guy, but I wouldn't be shocked with any of it. As you said, I wouldn't be shocked if it's Traore. I wouldn't be shocked if it's Waterman, because I love what he brings as well. But ultimately, I'm going to go with Javon Hadley. Sure to be wrong, and that's why I love what we get to do, is making all these predictions. Anything else on that or the depth, Dalton, beyond that?
Like I said, I just want to reiterate that that's the beauty of it, because Louisville, over the past couple of seasons, there were some questions about, well, why did Kenny Payne take this guy? Or is this guy truly an ACC level player? And over the past couple of seasons, it feels like there's only been a handful of guys that should be in a Louisville uniform. I don't want to sound to be that guy, but let's just call it how it is, to have this many players to where it's not a bad debate. It's real like who's Louisville going to go with, because they have so many options, and also kind of presents a little bit of a problem because you come out of the gate with some really good opposition. So you're going to have some of this figured out sort of on the fly, because you can't really afford to drop the ball many times in non-conference play. And that kind of plays factor into the next segment of predicting the record, predicting how they're going to fare in ACC play, and much more. So I'll let you take it away.
I don't need to. You just made the segue for us, DP. That's the conversation coming up in just a second. Right after I tell you about FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more right there on that same page where you place your bets. You're going to get started with $200 in bonus bets as guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. FanDuel's got all sorts of college basketball odds and lines and stuff going already. One of my favorites to look at is regular season odds for each of the conferences. For the ACC, Louisville, 5th in the odds right now. They jumped up a spot after FanDuel adjusted following the Tony Bennett retirement news. So Duke plus 135 leads the way. Then North Carolina at plus 360, Wake Forest 1,000, Clemson plus 1,100, and then come the Cards at plus 1,500. So Louisville fans, you believe in this group, man, you got a great number there. Go get in on that action and so much more at FanDuel. It's America's #1 sportsbook. Dalton has referenced it already, but there is a solid non-con slate for these Louisville Cardinals. As a reminder, ACC teams play 20 games in the conference slate, meaning with the max of 31 in the regular season, that there are 11 non-con games. And what I love in this day and age where you don't get excuses for not flipping a roster quickly because of the transfer portal, Pat Kelsey said, we're going all in. And I know some of it is games that are already scheduled and already on the books, but all the same, I love it. There are a couple bye games, Morehead State, Bellarmine, Winthrop, UTEP, and Eastern Kentucky. Some nice in-state rivalries there. But we do get 6 of the 11 non-con games against high major competition. So Dalton, let me just run through those, and then I'd love to get your takeaways on those. Saturday, November 9th. That's the Saturday at the end of the first week, man. This is great for basketball. Louisville hosting Tennessee is part of a home and home. Next year, we'll be back in Knoxville on December 16th. And then Battle for Atlantis, one of the premier, multi-team events we get during Feast Week. Starting off against Indiana, another team kind of roster rehauling a little bit this year. That's in Battle for Atlantis. The next day, we'll either play West Virginia or Gonzaga on Thanksgiving. West Virginia also bringing in a new coach this year. Gonzaga, kind of an under the radar, going to be just a great team this year. And then the final game, Battle for Atlantis, that'll be on Friday, November 29th, either Oklahoma, Providence, Davidson, or Arizona. And then the other two high major opponents, Tuesday, December 3rd, against Ole Miss at home in the Yum Center in the SEC-ACC Challenge. And then, of course, Louisville at Kentucky on Saturday, December 14th. So, Dalton, man, just a fun, but as you said, challenging non-conference slate. What do you make of it?
Like you said, it's challenging. I mean, it's good for basketball. One thing that I like Pat Kelsey said, he said in ACC Media Days, is like, yeah, this is a tough non-conference slate, but they got to play us too. You know, it's just the mindset change. Like all the things that Kenny Payne said, like it just didn't really register with how Louisville views this program. Pat Kelsey's like, if you don't plan to win, don't put your shoes on. You got to play us too. Like it's that, you know, I hate to say Louisville against the world, but that's how fans feel at this point. So, yeah, it's a tough non-conference slate where that's what I mentioned when Louisville has to be formidable right out of the gate because they can't afford to just, you know, dig themselves into a true hole. And I do think that they're going to be good enough to win some of these non-conference games. And don't forget, they also have Duke coming up at home in December. That's a tough one. You've got North Carolina early in January. You've got at Kentucky. Like you've got some really big time games that I think Louisville's going to surprise some people with how competitive they're going to be in these games. But no mistake needed, or no mistake to be made. This is a very challenging slate that can help or hurt you when it comes to your resume.
Yeah. Man, definitely going to be battle tested. And what I love is in this era where lots of teams are trying to figure out who they are as the new pieces all come together, you got to do it. You got no choice but to do it, especially getting away down to Atlantis. Those trips always help. The summer trip, I think that helps. And so we're going to find out a lot about this Louisville team early. As Dalton said, the ACC always plays one conference game, or at least since the onset of the ACC network, has played one conference game during non-conference play, and that'll be Louisville hosting Duke on December 8th. And then the third ACC game is hosting North Carolina. So you get both of those schools, the top two in the conference, at least by preseason voting, at home, 2 of your first 3 ACC games. So more finding out who are we kind of right out of the gate. And I love it that North Carolina game is on New Year's Day, Dalton. We might have to do a little crossover for that bad boy.
I'm here for it.
Okay, let's make it. It'll be great. Now, in the new 18-team ACC, you play 3 opponents twice. For Louisville, that'll be Florida State, and that'll be Virginia, and that'll be Pittsburgh. So that's the 3 home opponents. Everyone else is either only home or only on the road. And one of the parts of the schedule that really stood out to me, Dalton, is there's a stretch from February 1st through February 25th, the entire month of February for Louisville, 5 ACC games on the road, and just 2 at home, at Georgia Tech, at Boston College, at NC State, at Notre Dame, at Virginia Tech, while you get Miami and Florida State at home. That seems like it's going to be a critical stretch for the Cards.
Yeah, it's just it's the thing about it is the way we talk about a stretch on October 22nd versus how we might be talking about a stretch on February 22nd could be so different. And that's sort of the caveat of all this is that preseason, hype and expectations are just that. The games still have to be played. A lot of these ACC teams, maybe not to the full extent that Louisville has it, but they've had to turn over the roster too and make some key additions because of their key departures. So, and there's been some coaching changes. How good's Virginia going to look? That's also going to be something. There's so many question marks that like the mantra for Louisville is, it's kind of cliche, but focus on this game.
Yeah.
Control what you can control.
Yeah.
So, I mean, on paper, look, winning on the road is tough in conference play. So by default, it's going to be more challenging. But as opposed to how good those particular teams are going to be, gosh, man, it's like throwing a dart at the board at this point.
It really is. It really is. And the trade-off of all those road games is all 3 of the final ACC games, all 3 ACC games in March are at home, hosting Pitt and then hosting the 2 new California schools, Cal on Wednesday, March 5th, and Stanford to wrap the regular season on March 8th. Both of those teams, the California teams, again, on paper, we don't know yet, but on paper, they look like they will not be great. So hopefully a nice way for Louisville to round out conference play. When it's all said and done, Dalton, where do you have the Cards finishing in the ACC this year?
Well, for reference, let's look at the top 5 last year in terms of conference records. North Carolina was number 1, 17-3. Duke 15-5 in second. UVA 13-7 in third. Pitt at 12-8 in fourth, and then Clemson got the 5th spot at 11-9. There were a couple teams that also finished at that. And then the year prior, it was a little bit more balanced. They didn't really have a top alpha dog. UNC was that team this year. I imagine Carolina and Duke are probably going to be the top 2 teams, in my opinion, this upcoming season. So call me crazy, Isaac. This is where, it's going to determine if you know ball or not. Now, granted, you're throwing a dart at the board with this team. I have been very vocal. I'm bullish on them. I think that this is a top 5 ACC team. I truly do. I have them overall at 21-10, 20-11 if they lose an extra one in Atlantis. But I think that they're going to go 21-10. I think that they'll go 13-7 in conference play is what I kind of have them at right now. And I think 13-7 is good enough for top 5. So regardless of where that lands in the pecking order, TBD, but I do think I'm going to go out on a limb here. You can come back to this video in March if you're that committed to show me that I'm wrong. Go ahead. That's your time, not mine.
That's a big commitment. That's a big commitment.
But there are some petty people that listen to Locked On Louisville and make it a point of emphasis to just be generational haters. So it is what it is. But I'm going to go with Louisville in the top 5 of ACC play.
Man, that would be incredible. I put Louisville at 8th, so a little bit better than where the preseason ACC media poll was, but just kind of waiting to see. I'm taking a wait and see approach because I'm with you on. I think
that's okay. That is perfectly fine. Like people are like, oh, what do you think about this guy putting him this low? Again, preseason predictions do not matter. I don't fault anyone for waiting and seeing how good Pat Kelsey is or isn't going to be. Like, that is perfectly fine. I'm just a little bit higher. There's nothing wrong with having them a little lower, just from a logic standpoint.
Yeah. And so ultimately it doesn't matter, but I have them 8th. And I think the talent is there. And if the talent comes together, then I'm low at 8. I have zero problem saying that. I have the Cards finishing 8-3 in non-con play, 11-9 in ACC play, taking some road lumps there, and ultimately finishing 19-12. I would love to see Pat Kelsey get to 20 wins in the regular season in year 1, but I think they'll get at least one in the ACC play to get to 20 wins. And man, that would be what a welcome sight a 2-0 would be in the heck. What a welcome sight just double digits would be in the win column for Louisville this year, ultimately, Dalton. And man, that would be a great day if we can get there. All right, last word, and then we'll get out of here. Yes or no, is Louisville making the NCAA tournament? And if so, what's the seed and how far are they going?
I think they do. I think that they get back there. And even in 19 and 12, we saw some teams with 12 regular season losses make it in. I think that one thing that does help Louisville is how tough this schedule is. The net ranking could be a little higher with more losses because there's more opportunities for some marquee signature victories, which I think what helps them in ACC play is they've got some time to figure it out in non-conference play. And I think that they're going to mesh around the first part of the years when you're going to see Louisville at its best. I do think they make the tournament. Referencing it's going to be challenging because it all depends on the board. I think that you're probably looking anywhere from a 6 to a 9 seed. I'm going to go with the 7. I think Louisville gets a 7 seed. I think that this is probably a second round team that loses to the 2 seed, in my opinion. But I think that they're going to get a tournament win. I guess you can call it a hot take. I don't even know if it's hot or not because some people have seemingly gone further than I have. I think that this team is not only going to get to the tournament, I think they get their first tournament win since 2017. Don't know how much further they'll go than that. I think they have a considerable ceiling, but a ceiling isn't always reality. So I'm going to try to be as realistic as I can and say second game.
Yeah. With my 19 and 12 regular season, winning a game in the ACC tournament, I'm going to have Louisville getting in. I'm all in on that. Getting a 9 seed, winning that 8-9 toss-up game, and then ultimately falling in round 2.
Oh, go ahead.
No, and then just falling in round 2 to the 1 seed. Yeah.
You have them upsetting the 1 seed, right?
Yes, it's happening. Dude,
everyone boo this man. Everyone boo this man. Tap boo in the chat for Isaac right now.
Boo. I love it. All right, gang. That's a fun show, man. Hopefully Louisville is back. I think that's the theme of the show. Yeah. College basketball needs Louisville basketball to be good. Come on, Pat Kelsey. We believe in you. You can do this. That's what we're all looking for. Such a fun time being with Dalton today. Make sure you go follow him on Twitter at @dpence_. Don't forget the underscore. That's important or you won't find him. Make sure you check out Locked On Cardinals, where, man, he's doing a great job there with Louisville. I guess it's technically Locked On Louisville, but whatever. Go check it out and make sure there's a lot of Cardinals out there in the world, folks. But Dalton does a great job every day, both with Louisville basketball and football and everything else there going on at Louisville. And so very excited for this season and what's going to happen. Folks, if you haven't subscribed to both our shows, please make sure to do so on video and audio. If you haven't joined the Locked On College Basketball Discord, we'd love to have you in there where we're chatting college basketball all the time. It's a free thing to join, and the link for that is in the show notes. As always, I want to say apologies to the Lawyer family. Let's go Wildcats, although today, definitely we don't mean that in the Kentucky sort of way, because this is a little
you gotta clarify that, my man.
So here's the context quickly. Context for it. There was a show where Andy and I started talking about somehow we just got on to like every team is seemingly the Wildcats. And so we just started, we're like, man, how about those UCLA Wildcats? They're going to have a game on Saturday. It's going to be fun. So, and then usually it just feels like we talk about at least one Wildcat on every show. And so it's just kind of a long-standing joke now. So to all you Louisville Wildcats fans out there, have a great season. We believe in you all. We'll talk again tomorrow on the show, but until then, peace. L's up.